Welcome to This Explainer. Look, if you're checking your feed dozens of times a day and just feeling completely exhausted by the whole political landscape right now, I want to start off by validating that. It feels relentless for all of us. But what if that exhaustion isn't just about the news itself, but how we are biologically and psychologically wired to interact with it? Today, we're going to look at a framework for stepping out of what we call the reaction loop, and we're going to build a roadmap for, well, getting our minds back.
Okay, let's dive into this. Why does it constantly feel like every single headline is a five-alarm fire? You open your feed, and it's just a barrage of chaos, right? Everything feels immediate, everything feels dire. You're scrolling, your heart rate goes up, your focus narrows, and suddenly you're completely swept up in this frantic energy of the moment. And you know why? It feels like an emergency, because it is literally built to feel exactly that way. You see, the platforms we use to consume the news, the machine we're inside, they are engineered specifically to capture your attention, not to genuinely inform it. And there's a real biological reality driving this. Our brains actually evolved to treat fear and anger as super urgent. To our nervous systems, fear and anger are far more salient than calm, nuanced curiosity. So the most agitating content reliably wins our focus. It doesn't matter if it's true, it doesn't matter if it's deeply important, if it makes you angry or afraid, it acts like a magnet for your attention. You are essentially a calm silhouette just being bombarded by this chaotic, glowing noise that pulls your focus right out of you.
Moving on to Section 2, the root cause, looking at inherited versus chosen politics. Now that we understand that external machine, let's slow things down a bit and look at our internal psychology. How do we even arrive at these beliefs we defend so fiercely? Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the stark contrast between what we absorb and what we actually choose. Most people don't consciously choose their politics, they just absorb them, usually from their family, long before they're old enough to critically examine them. It's kind of like a glowing thread extending from your past, pulling you down a specific path. And because it's inherited, it just feels like baseline reality, which makes an inherited identity almost totally invisible to the person holding it. The very first act of intellectual integrity is simply noticing that inheritance. It's about stopping at the fork in the road and asking yourself, wait, would I actually choose this on my own terms? All right, on to Section 3, the pivot. Let's talk about breaking the loop. So once we recognize that our starting point might have been handed to us rather than chosen by us, how do we actually stop this machine from just yanking us around? Well, we have to shift from diagnosing the problem to actually taking concrete action. And that starts with understanding reflexes. Everyone has them. Reflexes are those patterns of instant reaction that fire off before conscious thought even arrives on the scene. Think of a reflex like a hot, glowing ember placed right in your open hand. Your immediate instinct is to either crush it or throw it. But feeding those reflexes for that tiny, fleeting reward, like, the thrill of winning an argument in a comment section at 2 a.m., that is exactly how we hand our minds over to a process designed by someone else. So the crucial point is that the goal isn't pretending we don't have these reflexes. We're human. We all have them. The honest starting point is this simple 3-step process. 1. Notice the reflex. Just observe that glowing ember in your hand. 2. Name it. Literally say to yourself, I am feeling reactive anger right now. And 3. Refuse to be ruled by it. Don't throw the ember. Don't clutch it. Just observe it. By simply pausing that instant reaction, you take back your agency from the feed. This brings us to Section 4, the new metric, evaluating actions over words. If we aren't going to be driven by those reflexes, we need a totally new, objective metric, one that completely bypasses all that tribalism and emotional manipulation. Let's move to and see how this builds, because look at the old questions we are trained to ask. Is this candidate on my side, or do they say the right things? Those questions just keep us trapped right in that reaction loop. Instead, we need to ask, is there a coherent philosophy guiding their actions? And do their actions over time point towards something articulable? We basically have to stop measuring politicians against a side and start measuring them against an intention. I really want you to let this sink in. Words are cheap and instantly available. Actions cost something and reveal what is actually valued. Think of it like a scale. On one side, you've got a massive tangle of colorful, completely weightless slogans. On the other side, a single, solid stone. That stone action will always be heavier. Actions are the true currency of political reality. When you objectively evaluate any political flavor neutrally, you just look at the path they walk. And this brilliantly illustrates how to do that. A coherent regime will leave a trail of decisions that actually make sense together, kind of like footprints leading clearly toward a distant landmark.
An incoherent regime, on the other hand, leaves a trail of decisions that completely contradict each other, serving absolutely no articulable purpose beyond just surviving that specific moment in the news cycle. It's a chaotic, looping path going nowhere. When you look at actions instead of words, the coherence, or the total lack of it, becomes undeniably clear.
Finally, Section 5, the empowered conclusion, finding your ground. When you step out of the machine and start looking at that coherent trail of actions, there's a massive psychological reward waiting for you. Just look at what this frees us from. First, we no longer have to live inside a daily emotional weather report dictated by whatever headline the platforms decided to push on us today. Second, we don't have to define ourselves in opposition to anyone. I mean, if you're just opposing someone, you're still letting them set the terms of your identity. And third, we finally get to stand somewhere stable. Imagine standing calmly on a solid rock above a turbulent, swirling sea of noise. You get to look at the horizon, evaluate the actions, and not be constantly tossed around by the chaos you're being shown. So what exactly is this new posture we adopt? It's kind of like a deep-rooted tree on a hillside. The branches might move with the wind, sure, but the trunk stays perfectly still. You choose your politics the way you choose any serious commitment, with deep attention, brutal honesty, and plenty of time. You hold those politics with strong conviction, but without the compulsion to fight every single battle. And above all, you learn to trust your judgment more than your immediate reflexes, and you definitely trust your reflexes far more than your curated feed. Which leaves us right here. I want you to step away from the screen today and think deeply about your own inheritance. Take a really close look at the beliefs you defend the hardest and ask yourself, are your politics simply a reflex, or are they truly a choice?